Guys, benpaines here, and today we're back once again for another video, and this time we're down at Teamsport Bristol once again, taking on a Monday night social alongside Harley Smith and Robbie Petchy, who are up ahead of us in the third and final session of the evening. Now, before we get into the video, I am recording this one due to the fact that I took my camera down to the race, which was the TopGun event the week previously on the Thursday. However, unfortunately, me being a complete melon, I forgot to bring my batteries with me, which is really silly and really annoying, but it's just the way it is. So instead, I've got some footage from the Monday night social event where we did get some pretty quick times, and I hope that this video sort of helps some of you guys out, much like the lap guide I did last week. So if you're new to the channel, if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, as it really does help me out. And if you enjoy this video, make sure to leave a thumbs up as well, as I really do appreciate it. But you can see coming straight into the footage, we've done a couple of laps coming out on our out lap and then one lap behind Harley, and to begin with, we've already managed to put in a 37.780 lap time, which is a pretty respectable time in these karts at the moment. Obviously, we're using the new karts, which I have mentioned previously, and they've just been bedding in better and better as time has gone on recently. So we come across the line on our second lap with 37.478, and we're just hoping to try and get into the 36s as quickly as possible, as Harley sends a really nice move down the inside of the driver up ahead of him there. So we decided to follow him through and hope that we're able to just carry some momentum further on into the session, just trying to get a bit of clean air so we can put in some quick lap times. As I mentioned in the video previously that I did want to make last week, sorry, I did in fact manage to get a 36.2 second lap time, which was only a couple hundredths off the new broken lap record, which was set by Aiden Dancer. And honestly, I couldn't be happier with my pace at the moment in these karts. I'm just hoping to try and carry this through in some of the outdoor racing that we're going to be doing later on in the season. Actually, we have Castle Coombe very soon for the SRK Championship alongside Harley and other drivers from Bristol. Aaron Mitchell-Begley will be racing for Kinetica Racing Team together. So jumping back into the video, we have managed to find a little bit of track space here, myself and Harley, and decided to sit behind him just to try and help him out, try and assess some of the lines that he was taking after his month hiatus in Japan. But I was also trying to put in my own respectable lap times, as I didn't want Robbie up ahead of us sort of jetting away into the distance and just getting bragging rights over us. So we come across the line on our last lap despite being able to make an overtake with a 37.265, which is actually our fastest lap of the session so far. It's not our fastest lap of the evening. We were able to get down into the 36.7, I believe, in the second session, so the one before this, which I am not showing. So instead, we're right up behind Harley here, trying to stay as close as possible to him without bumping into him and disrupting his lines. And you can see we're pretty much bumper to bumper as we come across the line in this lap with a 37.020, where we managed to shave off another 2 tenths in our lap time so far in this session, which I'm really happy about. Obviously aiming to get down into those 36-second lap times consistently, which is where I was actually able to situate myself in the previous session I did last week. So I'm just hoping that we can sort of keep this pace up and really go for some pretty solid lap times, just to keep our eye in, ready for the rest of the season. Now, obviously, I think this has helped at the moment. Obviously, Bristol feels extremely grippy, and one thing I tell quite a few people is just go to different tracks, experiment and try them. Obviously, Bristol is notorious for being quite a slippy track, and now that it's become quite grippy, I feel like I have personally come to grips, pardon the pun, with the track a lot quicker than some of the other drivers, especially those that are a bit lighter and depend on their raw pace. So just by having that little bit of expanded knowledge, by just visiting other tracks, doing 1 or 2 sessions there, it's really allowed me to pick this track up and the way it's running at the moment quite quickly. So we're gonna, in this last lap, we did actually back off Harley a little bit to give ourselves a little bit of space, and you can see once again we come across the line with a 36.585, which was in fact our fastest lap of the session and of the evening, and it was actually the fastest overall time of the evening, which I was really happy with. Obviously, just from having that little bit of extra space, we were able to then really reel Harley back in, especially as he was getting slowed down by one of the other drivers that were up ahead of him. Now, unfortunately, I was unable to beat this session, or the lap in this session, sorry, just due to being in traffic, having a bit of fun, and unfortunately Harley's kart actually decides to conk out later in the session, which caused a red flag. The karts then began to cool down, and we're just unable to get back on the pace as much as we were beginning to at this point in the session. Now you can see here we are in a bit of a train, so it's going to be a bit of an overtaking session as we begin to round out to come up the ramp. Now one thing I have actually noted as well quite recently is I've been doing a lot of sim racing, and then just by understanding the brakes a little bit better from playing different games, it has allowed me to then carry a little bit more momentum through each corner, which I was unable to do on that lap. You see I was a little bit displeased as one of the drivers just went straight into the side of me, but it was all fun and games and we had a laugh about it after this session. But as we come around on this lap, obviously a bit slower due to the contact, you can see that Harley just pulls over to the right hand side here, and he actually just, his kart dies, and that's sort of where the red flag then gets brought out. But as I mentioned, in terms of braking and playing video games, just from doing that, I find I'm able to hold a little bit more momentum through corners at the moment, just understanding the limits of the brakes, which is really crucial in these karts down at Bristol at the moment, because they lock up very quickly, so you don't have to apply a lot of pressure, and understanding where the limit is in the brakes here really does benefit your lap times. Now obviously most people think that to be quick you just have to be quick on the accelerator, but I think most of the time at the moment gained at Bristol is definitely through the brake pedal, which I would say is arguably a lot more important compared to the accelerator, just because you're able to get the kart slowed down enough where you're able to make the corner, but you also want to do this in a way where you're preserving as much momentum as possible, which I have mentioned earlier in the video. Now coming around the last couple of corners once again, had a little bit of clean air here between myself and the driver up ahead, and just from coming straight off of the red flag, you can see we come across the line with a 37 dead. 37000, can't get much more rounded than that. So we were just trying to get our head down here, trying to sort of ignore the lines that the driver ahead was taking, because they seem to be quite wayward. They then decided to wave us past, which I was quite happy about, as this then led us to have a bit of clean air to try and catch up with Robbie Petchy, who is one of the quicker drivers down at Bristol at the moment. So I thought in my head that if I was able to begin to close this gap on him, then we'd be on some pretty solid times come the end of the session. Now we come across the line once again on this lap at 37.078, so losing a little bit of time on that lap, but obviously we did have to contend with a little bit of traffic and maybe making a few mistakes throughout that lap. But now that I had Robbie in the sights up ahead, it was just a case of getting the foot down as hard as we can, get on the brakes as smoothly as possible, and really try and preserve as much momentum through each of the corners as we could to ensure that we sort of close that gap and get a pretty solid time in the 36-second region. Now coming down the last couple of corners once again, as I mentioned in my track mode video, just slowly releasing the brake and slowly applying the brake, and then getting on the power as early as possible, just to try and get as good a run down the start finish straight as possible. And that then led us to get a 36.932 second lap time, our second 36-second lap time of the session. Obviously still 4 tenths off our previous time that we were able to do right at the beginning of the session, but we're still on for some good momentum now to try and sort of get quicker as the session goes on, especially as I've mentioned in previous videos in the past, having a reference or driver up ahead is always good to try and push towards to see if you're closing the gap. Obviously you're gaining time and you're being quicker, and obviously if you're sort of dropping back and you're losing time. And you can see that we are just being very consistent now, within a tenth once again, 36.854, and just using all the references that I did mention in the track guide, just to try and really minimise the track length. Obviously you want to try and use as much of the track as possible, but you also want to sort of minimise the distance that you're travelling, so it's a bit of a difficult juggle. You can see here I'm trying to maximise as much of the track as possible, moving all the way to the right to then sweep back to the left, whereas on other corners I am staying more to the middle, just to minimise the distance that the car has to actually travel going through the corners. Now we did in fact manage to close down on Robbie as we were sort of continuing through the session. He decides to slow down and tries to slot in behind us here to try and get in sort of the thermal tow and try and get a decent lap time coming towards the end of the session. However, I believe that this was rounding out near the end of the session, so I turned around, gave him a bit of a wave, as I had actually managed to create a bit of a gap to him once again, despite just being quite close on pace usually. So we're coming through the last couple of corners here, trying to stay as close to the barriers as possible and maintain that momentum as I've sort of preached throughout the video. Again, getting as close to the apexes as we can, and we then come across the line on our very last lap of the session with a 36.636. So only a tenth off, or half a tenth off our fastest lap in the session, and quite consistent coming towards the end of it. But that does in fact bring us to the end of the video as we have a little conversation with Robbie. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. If you have, can you please leave a like on the video down below if you have enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you're new, if you haven't already, as I really do appreciate it. We've got the first round of the SRK Championship coming up very soon at Castle Coon, as I mentioned, and if you want to stay up to date with me a little bit more, my link tree is down below in the description. But in the meantime, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.